Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Life, Spirit, and the Messy Middle. I'm Maria, and today I want to explore a topic that has fascinated me for years. It begins with memory. Now, we store pieces of our childhood, important moments, pain, love, and experiences within our minds. But if we've lived before, which I believe we have, if consciousness extends beyond one lifetime, then where do those memories reside? And is there something larger that remembers what we cannot? Now, before I go on, I want to apologize to everyone that I didn't put out a video last week. Unfortunately, I do have autoimmune diseases and sometimes I do get flare ups. Unfortunately, last week was a really, really busy week, and somehow during that very busy, stressful week, I got a flare up and I was in bed most of the weekend. In a lot of pain, unfortunately. Now, I'm not completely 100%, but I needed to get a video out. I've wanted to get this video out. I've been researching it for a long time now. So here we go. And also, I just want a quick note to say that everything I share on this channel is for entertainment purposes only and personal reflection. These are just my interpretations, the research I've gathered, and, you know, my beliefs. And I basically speak as an empath and as an intuitive. Um, so if that's not what you believe in, that's fine. This is just the way I see things, and you're welcome to see it differently. Now, the topic we are delving in today is one of the most mysterious spiritual concepts that has ever been discussed, really. That's the Akashic Records. The Akashic Records are believed to contain every thought, every emotion, experience, intention, and possibly every soul's journey that ever existed. Okay. Now, some describe them as energetic field or a living consciousness that stores basically the imprints beyond the physical. And I know that immediately that raises questions. How could something hold all of that? But the more I have explored this subject, the more I realize that these ideas, or this idea of the Akashic Records, isn't confined to one religion or one culture, or even stories that a person can make up and write about. Because versions of these ideas, or this idea, seems to appear throughout human history. The word Akashic comes from Sanskrit, one of the world's oldest languages, originating in ancient India. And it roughly translates to sky, space, or ether. In ancient traditions, Akasha was actually considered the fifth element, representing the unseen field connecting all things. Also, originally, Akasha wasn't necessarily described as a giant cosmic library the way we imagine it today. That interpretation actually came much later. Now, ancient teachings describe the Akashic more of like an invisible web of connecting all existence through vibrations and consciousness. However, when you begin looking across different cultures, the same pattern starts to appear. The ancient Indian Upanishads describe reality as interconnected through vibration. Ancient Egypt had the hall of Ma'at, where after death, your heart was weighed against truth itself. And in Tibetan teachings, though the Tibetan Book of the Dead, consciousness encounters reflections of its own actions and experiences after death. That's what their Book of Death describes the Akashic Records as. And when we go and look at all three of the Abrahamic religions, we find the Book of Life. The idea that names and deeds are somehow remembered and recorded beyond this physical existence. Different names, different symbols, different stories, even different accounts. But underneath all of them seems to be one recurring idea. And that appears that our existence is being recorded, not just by human hands and artifacts, but by a more precise, objective ledger of our existence. Now, maybe memory doesn't only exist within us. Maybe everything we experience leaves an imprint or some sort of, acknowledgement somewhere. Or, maybe these traditions weren't trying to describe a physical place at all. Maybe they were just trying to describe something much harder to explain. Like, for example, connection. But so that we understand, let's talk about one of the people who helped bring this idea into modern spiritual discussion, and she's called Helena Blavatsky. Now, I've spoken to her, not spoken to her, I've spoken about her before in other videos. Go and check them out. I'm sure you'll love those as well. Now, whether people agree with her teachings or not, Helena Blavatsky had a major influence on modern spirituality. Those are my beliefs. And many people actually do agree with that theory. Blavatsky co-founded the Theosophical Society in the late 1800s and became very well known for bringing together Eastern philosophy, mysticism, esoteric teachings, and ancient symbolism, and also other spiritual concepts that were largely unfamiliar to the Western audiences of the time. She was, let's say, interested in the idea that humanity's oldest stories may contain deeper truths hidden beneath symbolism and mythology. Now, before anyone says that, in the 1800s, many esoteric movements began. But let's not forget that so did many, many ideological movements too. For example, the political one that many of us currently are pushing against these days. I'm sure you know the one, that certain Middle Eastern one that has become also part of some Christian factions, and that are currently committing the G word side type of theological belief. But I digress. Let's talk about the rest of this. Anyway, Blavatsky wrote about something she referred to as the Akashic Records, or the Akashic Light, as she said it, describing it as a kind of living imprint of existence, a field where thoughts, actions, and emotions and experiences leave an energetic trace. Now, interestingly, she didn't originally use the phrase Akashic Records in the way many people use it today. That language actually developed later through writers and spiritual traditions that expanded her ideas into what became known as the Akashic Records today, or the spiritual movement today. Now, according to her perspectives, certain people could access this field through expanded states of awareness, spiritual development, or forms of inner perception that go beyond the normal senses. She also connected these ideas to larger theories about humanity's spiritual evolution, including Atlantis, Lemuria, and cycles of civilization, uh, and the possibility that human consciousness develops in stages of immense periods of time. Most of us have experienced moments that feel strangely familiar, meeting someone and instantly feeling a connection, or visiting a place that somehow feels known, but you've never been there before, or learning something that mostly feels more like you're remembering instead of actually learning. And please don't confuse me with someone that's trying to tell you what to believe in, because I'm not saying that this proves the existence of past lives or the Akashic records. But I do think those experiences are part of why ideas like this continue to resonate with people. And so this brings me to also Edgar Cayce. Now, I have spoken also about him before. Now, Cayce, who was often called a sleeping prophet, because he would enter trance-like states and answer questions while appearing to be asleep. And his interpretation leaned more toward possibilities rather than destiny. He actually suggested that patterns may exist, but choices still matter. Personally, I actually prefer that idea because without choice, where does free will fit? And like Casey, I also believe that choices matter and awareness matters, growth matters. One of Casey's ideas was that souls enter the physical life for growth and greater awareness of unity within or with creative force. And I suppose that's something that should be up to everyone's interpretation, really, because I feel there's something comforting about the idea that maybe life itself isn't about perfection, um, and getting everything right, or maybe it's just about experiences, learning and becoming more aware of not just ourselves, but of each other. Now, naturally, another question, I believe, follows this. So, if something like the Records exists, where would it actually be? Obviously, nobody has uncovered a giant hidden library recording every life that has ever existed. Most modern interpretations don't describe the records as physical, sorry, my dog's, you know, barking at somebody, physical location at all. They describe them more like a consciousness itself, something woven into reality rather than separated from it. Present, but not always perceived. And I suppose once I started looking at it that way, I found myself asking something else entirely. And that was, if the records aren't a place, then why do so many cultures describe something remarkably similar? And this brings me to psychologist Carl Jung. He introduced the concept of the collective unconsciousness, suggesting that beneath our personal minds may exist a deeper shared layer of symbols, archetypes, and inherited patterns. Things like myths are in regards to floods appear across cultures. Sacred mountains appear everywhere. Dragons, creation stories, death and rebirth themes, journeys through darkness into the light. All these patterns repeat across civilizations that are separated by oceans and time. Some compare Jung's ideas to the Akashic Records, and I can understand why, obviously, but there is a difference. Collective consciousness suggests humans may share symbolic memory, but the Akashic Records concept goes much further. It suggests that thoughts, experiences, emotions, and perhaps all life itself leave an imprint. And when I mean all life, I don't just mean human life, animal life, plant life, extraterrestrial life, or non human life. That all leaves an imprint. But what fascinated me most wasn't whether one is right or wrong. Okay, that's just logic. It was how often humanity returns to the same questions. While researching, I actually came across a short story called The Library of Babel by an Argentine writer called George Luis Borges. The story he writes and imagines as describes the Akashic Records as an infinite library containing every possible combination of knowledge, truth, error, history, and possibility. And I remember actually stopping for a moment because I thought that sounds vaguely familiar, which it does. The difference is that Borges imagined information existing through endless random combinations, while the Akashic concept again suggests information exists through meaning and consciousness and connection. I think that maybe that comparison says something interesting. Maybe wisdom isn't about collecting endless information. Maybe it's just about understanding what actually matters, which naturally brings me to another question. If something like the Akashic Records exist, can we actually access them? Now, personally, I can sit here and tell you I've never accessed my own records, although I'm not convinced that means I can't. I just don't think I've actively tried to. Consciously, as an empath, as an intuitive, I get messages all the time from my guides, from spirit. To me, they come in images and words, and sometimes like little films in my mind. When I read the cards, it's the same sort of thing. I get impressions, I get words, I get little stories that help me understand what the cards are trying to tell me. Now, it's not that I don't want to see what the Akashic Records have installed for me or for anybody. I just almost feel like the purpose of coming to this earth, to being reincarnated, is to learn what your soul requires you to learn, whatever that may be. And if you go to the Akashic Records and you see what's coming, or what you're supposed to be doing, then that kind of deflects the purpose, right? But anyway, I digress. Now, views on this are all over the place. I suppose most people, or some people, believe access takes years of spiritual practice, while others think people experience glimpses of it all time, or experience glimpses of it all the time through dreams, meditation, intuition, prayer, hypnosis, or near-death experiences, or simply those strange moments were information that seemed to arrive out of nowhere. But one name I kept, and I have read a lot of what this person has written, is Dolores Cannon. If you've spent time in the spiritual communities, there's a good chance you already know who she is. Through her quantum healing hypnosis technique, shortly quoted as QHHT, Cannon believed people could assess information or access information beyond ordinary memory. So during hypnosis sessions, many described past lives, spiritual lessons, higher selves, future possibilities, and experiences Cannon tried and interpreted as access to universal knowledge. Her convoluted universe books became well known because many of the ideas people described overlapped with the Akashic concepts. For example, reincarnation, timelines, soul contracts, collective consciousness, and the possibility that consciousness exists beyond the physical, which is what I believe is our soul. Now, what stood out to me the most, though, was the view that information isn't necessarily hidden from us, okay? She believed fear, expectations, and limiting beliefs often become barriers themselves. And I did think about this because maybe the reason I don't want to find out or go and see if these Akashic records exist, which I believe they do, is out of fear or not wanting to know what will happen to this life that I live. Obviously, we've had many, and I've had many, but I don't want to know what happens to it. if you know what I mean. And I believe many people are the same. Who wants to know, you know, how I suppose some people do. I'm not really into knowing how I'm going to die, for example. That will happen when it's meant to happen. But again, that's everybody's own choice whether they want to know or not, right? What I'm saying is that obviously not everyone agrees with her work, um, or with her concepts and her ideas. Some even say that hypnosis uh, is like imagination or subconscious storytelling. Now, personally, I'm not entirely convinced it's that simple, although I've tried hypnosis and it didn't work on me for some reason. Another story for another day. Something else surprised me while researching this is that is or basically it's a topic of how often spiritual ideas and scientific conversations occasionally brush up against similar questions. People sometimes compare the Akashic concept to holographic theory, where information about the whole may exist within smaller parts, or quantum entanglement, where connection appears stranger than we once thought possible. That doesn't prove the Akashic Records, but I do find it interesting that questions about consciousness and connection keep appearing from completely different directions, right? Because when you think about it, it really is all connected. I also came across a phrase I'm sure many of you already know and have come across, even in regards to tarot reading, and that is as above, so below, as within, so without. And regardless of how you interpret that through your own beliefs, I think it leaves us with something worth thinking about. After reaching or researching all of this, where do I personally sit on this? Honestly, somewhere in the middle. No, honestly, I don't think science has all the answers. I don't think spirituality does either. But I do think human consciousness, intuition, and lived experiences deserve more exploration than we are often given thought to. Um, do I know for certain that the Akashic Records exist? No, of course not. I feel that they do. And that's part of being an intuitive, I guess. But this topic stopped being about, I think, proving something and more about asking better questions, which is what I love to do. But for me, I genuinely love to know and research, about these things. Again, it's what I love doing. And I would really love to know what you think. Do you see the Akashic Records as real, subconscious, or something else entirely? I would love for you to leave your thoughts below because I am curious as to where you all sit with this. Now, I will not be doing a reading today, oracle or tarot, as I haven't been the best. My hands are really swollen and sore from my last flare up because of my autoimmune disease. So I will leave it here for today. But before I finish, I just want to say that this channel has meant the world to me. My new subscribers, thank you so much for subscribing to me, for watching what I do. It really means a lot to me. And I just want people to know that I am creating this from my dining room table, which is what I call my little messy middle, okay? I'm on a disability pension, and due to my autoimmune diseases, of course, I cannot work. And I also care for my elderly father and my daughter who's on the spectrum. Life can be very chaotic, and sometimes, but creating these videos and exploring these topics with you all is something I generally love doing. For me, this is a space about curiosity, growth, asking bigger questions, and exploring ideas or exploring them together, basically, because I truly believe there is always more for us to learn and understand. Now, if you've made it this far and you enjoy these conversations, about spirituality, consciousness, hidden history, mythology that I also love, and bigger questions, I'd really appreciate your support. Please like this video, subscribe, or leave a comment. It generally helps more than you realize. It helps this little channel grow and allows me to keep researching, creating, and sharing the conversations with you. And also, if these topics do resonate with you, please also check out my book. The Elemental Crown is available on all major bookstore retailers. You can grab it in ebook form or in paperback form. I will leave a description of what the book is about in my description box, along with where you can find me on social media. And I want to thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now. Mwah. Bye.